Hey guys, thanks for joining me today on another episode of Adventures in CNC. Today we're going to be talking about 3 things that could possibly be wrong with the Chinese manufactured desktop CNCs. I've spent a lot of times on the forums. I own one, and since generally there's no tech support offered with these machines, or very little tech support, it can be really frustrating when something goes wrong. And these are 3 things that are typically wrong with them, possibly wrong with them. It's not always the case. But the first thing that's usually wrong with them is you've got some sort of faulty electronics or something is broken when you receive it. That was the case with mine. The motor was faulty, it was going bad when I received the CNC. It didn't really work for very long, and then there were some other things that happened, some other issues with everything that happened with my CNC that made the motor go out probably a lot more quickly than what it probably would have. It probably would have lasted a little bit longer had it not been in my shop that got hit by a tornado. The rest of the machine survived. The PC that I used with it survived. The machine actually had nothing physically wrong with it, but I think the water getting into the motor probably caused it to prematurely go out. But I was having the problems that I had after that before that issue happened. So I'm pretty sure, well, I know for a fact that the motor was faulty when I received it. I've been on a lot of forums and stuff, and all the things that it's been doing the entire time that I've had it go to show that there was either a faulty motor or something wrong with the way the motor was grounded. But there are other things that can be wrong with your CNC as well. Some of the controller cards can be bad cables, things like that, things that just don't work right out of the box. That is really frustrating, especially when you've ordered it from China and there's like almost zero tech support. They're always just going to blame it on something else. So it was the shipping, you'll have to ship it back, which is super expensive. So it's really frustrating when that is the problem. Number 2 thing that can be wrong with it, and you won't notice it until you get it up and running and you've run a couple of projects, is that one of the axes can be off. And if you've got one of the larger format CNCs, 6040, you're doing a full-size project, which is like 23 by 15, something like that on those, it's going to be noticeable across the entire length of the project. You're going to notice that one of those axes are off. Even if it's something as small as 0.25 millimeters, it's going to be noticeable across that entire project. And that can be, depending on what kind of machine you have, if it's one of those assemble yourself kits, it's not too bad because usually those have a certain margin of error that they can be adjusted with, so you just have to take the time to adjust it right and get everything working right. If it's a machine like mine that comes pre-assembled, those are pretty hard to adjust, and if it's off by like 1.5 millimeters, that's going to require you to take the machine apart and have one of the pieces machined by a professional to get it back on track and back on the line. Now if your Z-axis is off, a lot of times you're not going to notice it too much. On my machine, that's the problem. My Z-axis is off. So going up and down, it's off just a little bit, and that has to do with the bed itself. So there's a couple of different ways you can fix it. You can shim the bed, which is relatively easy to do. You can get some automotive feeler gauges and just shim it up that way. Or a better option, since you're probably already going to need a spoiler board, is to just get a flattening bit and level off your spoiler board, is what I plan on doing, and that will completely fix the problem. Now both those problems on their own can be incredibly frustrating, and the third problem is also kind of frustrating as well, because it isn't even something that's wrong with the CNC itself, it is user error. These machines are a little bit difficult to set up, especially if they're Mach 3 based. They aren't actually plug and play. You have to go through and set everything up via Mach 3 software to get it to run right. And if you get any one of those wrong, the machine doesn't work like it's supposed to, which can be incredibly frustrating. And it can also be really hard to track down, especially if you don't know a whole lot about CNCs and Mach 3. Now there are videos on YouTube that you're going to have to search through and find the one that's going to have the information in it. There's also a lot of help on the forums. These people aren't always going to know exactly what you did wrong. A lot of times you're just going to have to go through and rewatch or reread and double check everything that came with your CNC and go through the whole setup process again, and that can be a little bit frustrating and time consuming. So you want to make sure that you do it the first time. Also, sometimes user error is kind of silly. There was a guy a few years ago who had when I was getting ready to buy my CNC, he had one up on Craigslist, and it seemed like a pretty good deal. And I contacted him and I said, well, what's wrong with it? You said there's something wrong with the machine. And he was kind of describing some of the stuff, and it sounded like another problem that I had just had with a cheap computer that I bought off of somebody. And I said, huh. So what it turned out to be was that he had bought a used XP system off of somebody at a yard sale, and they had disabled the USB ports on the computer via the BIOS. So I told him, just go in there and turn the USB ports on. It should work. And as it turned out, it did kind of work for him, and he was able to get it up and running. I haven't been in contact with him since, so I don't know what kind of projects or anything he's done with it. But user error is also something that is extremely frustrating. Like I said, the Mach 3 machines are a little tricky to get set up. So just be aware of that when you're thinking, if you're thinking about purchasing one of these, or if you've already purchased one, you're having some problems with it. These might be 3 things to consider that might be wrong. A, is there a faulty component in the CNC itself? And you're going to have a multimeter and some knowledge of how things work to be able to diagnose that. B, if your projects are coming out just terrible, are the XYZ axes correct? Right? If they're off just a little bit, they're always going to ruin your project. Nothing's going to ever turn out right. And of course, number 3, if the machine's not working at all, you need to double check everything and make sure that you set it up properly. All right, thanks for checking this video out, guys. I appreciate your time and everything else. If you would, please give me a like, maybe leave a comment, and even subscribe. All right, thanks. See you guys in the next video.